Hello, everybody. We're excited to have you here. And to those, just turn the speaker off, Descartes, the computer speaker. Okay, good, better. It's nice to have a hybrid thing. We're having a little bit of technical difficulties with our owl. So for until we get that up and running, and our phenomenal IT director is here with us, who's trying to get the technology working again. In the meantime, for those of you who are online, we're not going to have a chance to see you here in the room. And for those of you who are here in the room, we won't get a chance to see you online until we get this little technical snafu straightened out. But I'm very, very excited to have everybody here today as we will begin our Lunch and Learn series that will last us through the month of April and then again into May, as we kind of trace our steps from our exodus from Egypt to our arrival at Mount Sinai and to our celebration of Shavuot. So first, just want to see what everyone's having for lunch. I don't see anybody here who brought lunch with them. There's no lunch. This was Lunch and Learn.
I'm delivering.
Joe has something, but he won't. Steve is drinking coffee. Phil, what do you got for lunch?
Coca-Cola.
You got nothing.
It's breakfast time in
No,
Southern
we're glad to have you.
California.
She's got a cup of coffee. You guys are so boring. There's no sushi
It's
here in the room.
breakfast
I would assume
time.
that people would be eating as many carbohydrates as was humanly possible today, and trying to gorge yourself on as much gluten as you can ingest to make up for next week our celebration. It is called the bread of affliction for a reason. So just please make sure that you have whatever you need to attend to your needs. But anyway, wish everybody a Chag Sameach, and we're excited to have you. And today, we're going to start our exploration of the Omer. And what's going to be guiding us is the thought that you can find in a very, very special book called... Okay, I think hang on one second.
We can't hear you, Rabbi. Then you couldn't hear me.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes. Now we can't.
So that the screen is extended main under here. Okay.
You sounded better before.
Sounded better before? There you go. Well, that's because we're using the owl, which is a little bit further distance to me. We're almost there. Aha! Now we're really cooking. Okay, thank you. Thank you. And if you can do me one favor, just bring that a little closer to me, and then we'll be all set. For as far as that will go. You're almost there. Okay, brilliant. Now you'll be able to see everybody in the room. We can all see you, so we can be one community. Thank you, Descartes. Can you hear me a little bit better now?
A little better.
The volume is low, though.
Well, can you see if you can make the microphone volume a little higher there? Okay, great. So as I was saying, we're going to be exploring this book, which is a book by Rabbi Karen Kedar called Omer, Counting. And it's a really, really unique book. Rabbi Karen Kedar was, the microphone is up as high as it will go. All right, well, we'll do the best we can. Rabbi Karen Kedar actually began her rabbinic career in all places, Temple Bethel Boca Raton, and was here for a few years. She was in Israel for a number of years, and most recently had a very, very successful career as a rabbi in Chicago, and she writes phenomenal works on Jewish spiritual growth. Has written a beautiful book about forgiveness. There's really, really beautiful, beautiful work that she does. And she's a good personal friend. And what she invites us to do is to use this period between Passover and Shavuot to really, as best as we can, use these days not just to sort of count up the Omer, but to do a whole lot of more meaningful introspection and reflection around themes of liberation and renewal and discovery. And we'll have a chance today to sort of set the table a little bit for what this is going to be. And then what we're going to be doing is each week of the Omer, when we have lunch and learn, we will be exploring the theme of that week. And there are 7 themes, and we'll have a chance to get into them a little bit today. But then each week will be a deep dive on that theme as it relates not just to the celebration of Passover, but just what does it mean for us as Jews to engage in these different themes. It'll make a little more sense as we go on. And so as we begin, we're going to say a blessing, and then I'm going to invite us to read a little text. Just looking at the chat, just making sure we have our. So if you'll join me, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Bless you, Adonai, our God, ruling spirit of the universe, who has kept us in life and sustained us and enabled us. Who has made us holy by giving his commandments to perform and commanded us to get busy with the study of Torah. Amen. Okay, so she starts with this poem. Is there someone who'd be willing to read for us this poem that she has us to begin with? Is it too small to read?
No, I can read it, Rabbi.
Go ahead, Judith.
This is The Great Journey by Rabbi Karen Kedar. To refine our lives, to become strong and resolved, to have meaning and purpose, depth and commitment, to live in awe and wonder and bear witness to life's grandeur. Have an active conversation with the invisible. Doubt and argue, dream and beg, ask for help. Ask for forgiveness, offer gratitude. Shout at the heavens when you despair, and raise your voice in song when you rejoice. Sit still through the silence of the spirit. Do not run from what cannot be known or understood. Life is mystery.
Because what she is trying to propose here is something actually quite profound. When you read this poem, and you can take a moment and read it again to yourself, what's it that you think she's reflecting on?
To be in touch with your soul.
Okay, so she's suggesting that we should try somehow to be in touch with our soul. Okay, good.
It's almost similar to what we do on our holy days.
Okay, it's interesting that it sounds almost like a prayer that you would say to introduce Rosh Hashanah. Interestingly, right, the first month in which we find ourselves, Nisan, is exactly half a year away from what? From the high holidays. Sukkot and Pesach are exactly 6 months apart from each other. They're opposite ends of the calendar world. They balance each other. So perhaps there is some idea of thinking about the kinds of themes that you might explore, right? If you were getting ready for the high holidays. Good. What else sort of jumps out at you from this poem? Yeah.
I would say it's just be connected
To be connected.
within oneself to every, in spirit and in personal understanding, to have that grow as well as to what's around us.
Good. So to foster a sense of connectedness to one's inner self, to one's authentic self, to one's core, right? To what the Hasidim called the nikud, right? The dot, that inner essence, right? and to also feel some sense of connection to the world around us, right? And that could be the world around us, and that could be the people who inhabit that world with us, right?
Yeah, it's almost like it's time to make decisions, things maybe that have been going over or stressing you out. This is a personal thing, but it's like that time to maybe take action.
Right, so maybe there's time to start thinking about making a change. Maybe it's time to start thinking of something about life that you want to transform, you want to move forward, you want to get off the block, so to speak. Good. Others, anybody online? So, to me, this is about I want you, if you can, to put yourself in the head of an Israelite slave pre-Moses. Somewhere in the midst of the 2nd century of our people's enslavement, where you do not have a living relative who remembers what it was to be free. And every day is the same. What you do that day may be a little different. You know, maybe one day you're moving the block over to this place, and maybe another day you're working the pulleys to lift the block up onto the next level. Maybe another day you're out in the fields gathering in the wheat so that you can have the straw that you can use to make your bricks. Who knows what your actual vocation might be? That might evolve over time, but your enslavement is not changing. And your expectation that anything will be different tomorrow is almost nil. Think about what that means and how different that is from our own experience of life. Right? We who live in our world, who are free people by and large, imagine life evolving, unfolding, changing, and that we get to, as best as our limited selves will allow, to direct that change. How many of you remember when you moved to Florida? The rest of you, it was so long ago you don't remember.
I
Right?
remember.
Anybody here on our ground, those who are online and in the room, are there any
Your audio is
native Floridians? Okay, so every one of us knows. The reason why we sometimes have trouble with the owl is if you're not muted, it can pick up because the owl doesn't let you interrupt. So I may be muting you. It's not because I don't love you. It's just to make sure we don't have interruption with the sound. Hopefully that will be a little bit better. So every one of us who is here, me included, made a decision at some stage of the game to uproot ourselves and to come here, right? For some of us, it was more recent. For others, it was decades ago, but we all made that choice at some stage. How did you do that?
I can tell you, for me,
Go ahead, Maddie.
I think I had a knowing. You know, life changes every day, but somehow intuitively I had a feeling to embark and first explore what do I do next, or where do I go from here?
Okay, so think about how much freedom is embedded in that wonder. That the idea that there could be a choice to be made, that I could live somewhere else, that I have the freedom to decide, is this the better option? Is this the better option for me? Where would I be happier? Where would I be more fulfilled? What are the pros and what are the cons? All of those things, right, that go through our heads as we think about making a life transition whatever, it could be a big transition, like uprooting yourself and moving to South Florida. Could be a little decision like, I'm going to try a new hobby. There was a woman who I knew who had been married for many, many years. Her husband had a very long illness and he died. And her whole life had been built around being married to him, raising their children, and then in the last many years of their life, taking care of him, and he died. And she was left with this massive vacuum of what do I do? This whole reimagination of her identity, because her identity had been being a mother and a caretaker and a wife, and then all those things were gone. Her kids were grown up. Her husband had died. He wasn't there to take care of. Now what? Now who am I? And I said, well, what did you used to maybe love to do that you don't do anymore because that wasn't like it didn't fit in your life? It wasn't something that your husband wanted to do with you or you were too busy. And she goes, when I was a teenager, I liked to paint. And I was pretty good at it. But I haven't painted since I started college because it wasn't what I was studying and I just didn't do it. And then I got married and then I had my children and I never painted. She enrolled at an art class at the Boca Museum. And this whole world blossomed for her. And she built friendships there and she started painting, and this whole flowering of her spirit helped her to really heal from this really difficult loss because she really discovered and so that's a little change, right? I wonder what it would be like if I took that class. I wonder what it would be like if I tried a new hobby. I wonder if it would be like if I was friends with so-and-so, right? So transitions and changes don't have to be gargantuan epochal changes, right? We're going to make aliyah, right? They can be little decisions that I'm going to move from where I am in life forward, whatever that turns out to be. And in whatever way we're constricted in our ability to move, right? Because there are things that constrain us. Our physical abilities, our mental acuity, finances, obligations and responsibilities to other loved ones. There's all kinds of things that, implicate how we move forward or when we move forward or whether we'll move forward. But there's this idea that we as free people get to make a choice. For a slave, you don't get to make a choice. And so Pesach is the season of our liberation, right? It's this time that we celebrate the fact that we are now different people. We can imagine a different future. We can move towards that different future. It might be scary. It might be unknown. It might be, as Rabbi Kedar suggests, a mystery. But think again about sort of what she suggests in this poem about what the real experience is of free life. That the real experience of free life is one where we are refining our lives, where we can become stronger and build resolution, that our lives can have meaning and depth and purpose and commitment, right? That we can open our hearts and our minds and our souls to be in radical amazement and awe and wonder, and that we can testify to the grandeur of life. That we can, this is one of my favorite phrases she uses, to have an active conversation with the invisible. What does it mean to have an active conversation with the invisible?
Something that's stronger, and I interpreted it to mean something that's bigger or stronger than I am.
Okay, so maybe it's a force or a power or a spiritual something, right, that's bigger than you. Okay, so that's part of dialoguing with the invisible. What else does it mean to have a conversation with the invisible?
It must mean that you have a relationship with the invisible.
Right, so what's the invisible? Could be God, could be the future. Right? So 19, 20 years ago, when Amy and I were trying to decide whether we were going to stay in New Jersey or move back to Florida, we were having a dialogue with the invisible. We didn't know what it would look like when we moved back here. We didn't know what it would look like when our children would come here. I didn't know what it was to be a senior rabbi of a large synagogue. I had kind of an inkling about it, and I had a lot of wondering about it. I had a lot of imagination about it. And in trying to think about it and say, is this the right thing for me? Is not the right thing to me? What do you think this could be? And what could this mean? And wouldn't we be happy? Or one would, all of that dialogue we were having with the invisible, because none of that was real yet. We didn't own a house in Florida. I didn't have a job in Florida. My kids didn't live there anymore. My little one was born in New Jersey, right? Who knew, right? So to have a conversation with the invisible can be talking to God, hey, what do I do? Right? And have a conversation with the invisible can be a conversation with what you imagine. I wonder what it would be like to wander through the wilderness. I wonder what it would be like to consider a different reality than the one I know. Whether it's I'm moving from a house to a condo, or I'm moving from this city to that city, or I'm going to try a new hobby, or I'm going to make a new friend, or I'm going to try to learn something. Or could be, right, look what follows about all of the ruptures I have. How many of you have a friend from whom you have had a falling out, and then you're having this conversation with yourself of, do I send a letter? Do I reach out and call? Do I try to restore that relationship? Or do I leave it alone? Maybe I'm happier leaving it alone. Maybe it's better to let, that was this time of my life and I don't need to unpack that anymore. And then there's the part of you that kind of says, well, yeah, Judy, I see your hand there. You need to unmute, my dear.
All of this reminds me of what the mindfulness approach is.
Very much so, right? What she said was it reminds her a little bit of what it means to engage in mindfulness practice, right? To cultivate a sense of awareness of who am I in the moment, right? Where are my ruptures? What are my despairs? And that I can voice that. And what are my rejoicings? And can I rejoice that? And share that. And then she concludes this idea, life is mystery. Life is only mystery when you're free. Life is not mysterious when you're a slave, because you know exactly what it's going to be, you know exactly what to expect, and it's not going to change. So what Passover asks us to imagine is to embrace this concept, this idea of mystery, and to see what it might offer us if we're brave enough to venture into the unknown, whatever the unknown is for us. So here's where we learn what the Omer is. Would someone like to read this for us? Go ahead.
Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the Israelite people and say to them, when you enter the land that I am giving to you and you reap its harvest, you shall bring the first sheaf of your harvest to the priest. He shall elevate the sheaf before God for acceptance in your behalf. The priest shall elevate it on the day after the Sabbath.
Okay, so this is from Leviticus 23. And it says, if you look at the 10th verse, the second verse there, Daber b'nei Yisrael v'amarta lehem, speak to the children of Israel and say to them, Ki tavo'u el ha'aretz asher ani noten lachem, when it shall be that you come into the land that I'm giving to you, uketzartem et ketzira, and you start to bring in the harvest, ve'vetem et Omer reshit ketzirchem el hakohen, you take of the first of that harvest, an Omer, which is a sheaf or a measure of grain, okay, from the harvest to the priest. Vehenif, and you wave or elevate like this, right? Anybody think of another holiday when we do that? Sukkot, right? Same animal, okay? Vehenif et Omer, you bring this sheaf of wheat or grain. In this case, it doesn't have to be wheat. In this case, it's probably barley, right? And you elevate it before God and you wave it. And why do you do this? L'tzorchen mimocharat Shabbat inifenu hakohen. So right after the Sabbath of the harvest, and once you've harvested, you have Shabbat. The day after Shabbat, Sunday, you bring it to the Kohen and you say, "Oh God, thank you for the harvest." And then keep going.
On the day that you elevate the sheep, you shall offer as a burnt offering to Adonai a lamb of the first year without blemish. The meal offering with it shall be 2/10 of a measure of choice flour with oil mixed in, an offering by fire of pleasing odor to Adonai, and the libation with it shall be of wine. Order of a hin.
Okay, so you have a sacrifice to celebrate. You have a lamb, that should sound familiar, right? And then you have a meal offering, right? You burn it up because it smells good, and you drink a quarter of a hin of wine, also sounds lovely. Okay, keep going.
Until that very day, until you have brought the offering of your God, you shall eat no bread or parched grain or fresh ears. It is a law for all time throughout the ages and all your settlements.
In other words, you don't take in your harvest, make a little bread for yourself, and then go to the priest. You go to the priest first, okay? But then lastly, keep going.
From the day on which you bring the sheep of elevation offering, the day after the Shabbat, you shall count off 7 weeks. They must be complete. You must count until the day after the 7th week, 50 days. Then you shall bring an offering of a new grain to Adonai.
Okay, so the idea is you grow your grain, say it's your wheat crop, right? You begin the harvest. The first thing you do is you cut down just a smush, just like a measure. You bring that to the priest and say, "Thank you for the harvest." And then what do? You go home and finish the harvest, which takes a long time, right? Depending on the size of your field. You take your big knife, right? I gotta pick up the grain, I gotta tie it up, I gotta bring it in, and I gotta bring it to the threshing floor, I gotta whack it, I gotta get the stuff, and I gotta get the grain out of it, and I gotta separate the seed from the chaff, and I gotta wash it off, and I gotta bring it right before I can have Shavuot, right? So it takes time to conduct the grain harvest. So they say during that period, you count off, and the counting is the important part, 7 weeks, they must be complete. Just like your antibiotic, you got to take all the pills, right? You must count until the day after the 7th week, the 50th day. And then what do? You bring the product, the new grain, to Adonai as a sacrifice. And what do we call that holiday when we get to do that? Shavuot, okay? So here we see in the Torah that we are required to count this period from the time we begin our grain harvest. Over time, they fixed this to the calendar to the 2nd day of Pesach. Why did they fix it to the 2nd day of Pesach and not the 1st day of Pesach?
I think they weren't sure which was the.
Oh, no, they're always sure, because they had a Seder and they had a meal, and so they know when Pesach was. Why don't they start the counting on the 1st day of Pesach? Can't work on the 1st day of Pesach. I'm not allowed to engage the harvest on the 1st day of Pesach. So my counting can't begin on the 1st day of Pesach. It has to begin after the festival. Those of us who live in the diaspora, who celebrate 2 nights of Pesach, or who have a traditional 8-day Pesach as opposed to a 7-day Pesach, because you add a day because of your experience in the diaspora, still start the counting even though it's a festival. That's the irony, right? So the irony is that you start counting the Omer even though it's still the 2nd day of the festival, because in ancient times, in the land of Israel, they don't have 2 days of the festival, they just have 1. Okay? Because the next day, you could start working, you could start your harvest. So to regulate, but Shavuot used to be a cascading holiday. It all depended on when you started your harvest. It could be a little later one year, it could be a little earlier the next year. But over time, they fixed these dates on the calendar to the 2nd day of Passover, to the 6th day of Sivan, right? Which is the festival of Shavuot. So part of what this festival does, this observance, is to connect us to the land of Israel. Part of what the celebration of the Omer is to remind us, for those of us who buy bread in a store and haven't gotten our hands dirty in a wheat field in some time, to be connected to the fact that, hey, there's a thing going on. We're not part of it, but it's interesting. What's the most important festival that you celebrate on kibbutz, especially the secular kibbutzim? Shavuot. Because that's the celebration of the harvest. The kibbutz was this agricultural place where a good harvest was the Sukkot, Passover. I don't read the Exodus, I don't read the Torah, I'm a secular Jew, but Shavuot is a big deal on agricultural kibbutzim. But more than just the idea of the physical attachment is the emotional, the spiritual attachment. So Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks, the former chief rabbi of Great Britain of blessed memory, wrote the following. He said, some of Judaism's most profound truths are to be found not in texts, but in time, in the Jewish calendar itself. And nowhere is this more so than in the case of Sfirat Omer, the counting of the 49 days from Pesach to Shavuot. At no time was the presence of God in nature, the force that through the green fuse drives the flower, so apparent. Think about it, right? We're so divorced from agriculture in our beautiful suburban lives, right? Even the agricultural reserve now is suburban paradise. If you go north on Lyons Road, it's the most hilarious sign. They keep the sign that says, welcome to the ag reserve and bridge heaven, right? Because you have bridges, Boca bridges, 735 bridges. There's bridges, right? But what there isn't so much out there anymore is agriculture. But if you're a farmer and you plow your field under and you prepare it and you sow it and then you watch as the grain comes out of the ground and rises tall, and you know I'm going to have sustenance. It's amazing. How many of you either keep a garden today or used to keep a garden? Right? My dad had an incredible green thumb. Amy and I have never met a plant we can't kill. But my dad had an amazing green thumb, and he used to keep a vegetable garden in our front yard. He would plant tomatoes and cucumbers and zucchini, and he always had something else that he was growing. He would tie the tomato plants to the stakes, and I hate tomatoes, but my sisters and my mom and he loved tomatoes, and we used to have so much fun going out there and picking the tomatoes off of the vine and then washing them and serving them with salad, or the cucumbers that we would grow and take them out of the garden and cut them and serve them. It's amazing to experience, right? So Laura shares, I have a garden. There's a great, I'm sorry, I have to, we can look at that in a minute. Let me just see if I can pull that up. Sorry, Laura, I'm having a little bit. We'll pull up your comment in a moment. But yeah, so that's in miniature. Imagine your entire livelihood was based on this huge field, right? And you watch the grain grow. It's like the most amazing thing to see. And it kind of powerful, but more than that, he writes, Jewish tradition rightly saw a different meaning to the act of counting days. Among the revolutions brought about by the Torah was the shift in consciousness from nature to history. The Jewish festivals are not only about the seasons of the year, they are also about the decisive events in the birth of a people. According to Maimonides, the people counted the days in longing as they approached the moment of revelation. Why did they count the days? Because they just couldn't wait to get to Torah. Couldn't wait to get to divine truth. For the mystics, the Kabbalists, the days represented a sense of purification from the corrosive effects of slavery to the idea of what does it mean to actually be a free moral actor. For Nachmanides, they meant that Pesach and Shavuot are actually one festival. In the same way that in the fall, Sukkot has 7 days, and then you get Shmini Atzeret Simchat Torah. So he says Pesach and Shavuot are actually one festival. And the Chol HaMoed that we think of as the days in the intermediate part of the festival, that's what the Omer is. Because Pesach is the celebration of liberation, of freedom. And Shavuot is the celebration of tethering that freedom to something bigger. What each of these interpretations implies is that Pesach does not stand alone because the Exodus as an event does not stand alone. Egypt was only the beginning of freedom. Moral code, the commandments heard at Sinai, the Israelites might have gained release from oppression, but they had not yet acquired liberty. And to Rabbi Sachs, there's a difference between freedom and liberty. Because I can do whatever I want, right? Liberty is what it is to have a free society. So the counting of the Omer, he says, is an act of retracing the steps from individual freedom to a free society. So for example, right, I might be free to do whatever I want, but if I want to live in society, what does Jean-Jacques Rousseau teach us? I've got to give up some of my freedom for the shared collective benefit of living in society, which means I can't steal, can't murder. I have to be trustworthy. I have to do what I say I'm going to do. And that means also, right, that there might be more to living in society than just getting what I need and want. Because what kind of a society do we propose to have as Jews?
Both sharing and giving.
Free.
Okay, a free society, a shared society, an organized society. Anyone online?
A religious society. Oh, we lost him again.
Covenantal society. What does it mean for a society to be covenantal? It means that we are in complete relationship with each other, where we are entitled to make demands on each other for our own shared well-being. The smallest unit of a covenantal society. Two. And where is that covenant formed? In a marriage, right? The smallest form of covenantal society is a marriage, right? Your household is a small society. And if I marry somebody, I say, what's going on in this household can't just be about what I want. It has to be also about what you want and you need. And because you're my partner, you get to make demands on me and I get to make demands on you. And if I make too many demands on you and it's not fair, that relationship is going to be in big trouble. Or if my partner makes more than the fair share of demands on me, or I'm not safe, I'm not treasured, I'm not validated or loved, if my place in that household isn't seen as sacred, then the endeavor falls apart.
Would you call that also obligations?
Sure, right? Because when I forge a covenant, I take upon myself the obligations of that covenant. When I take a few households and put them together, what do I have?
Community.
Amongst those shared households. A friend of mine told me that he used, when his kids were playing travel baseball, he said the team was really a kibbutz. Of these 15 boys that were on this team, their parents were a family. And any adult could discipline any child. Any adult was responsible for nurturing every child. So watching the game and another parent either couldn't make that trip or was getting a hot dog and you saw your kid fall, you wouldn't wait and say, hey, go get that kid. You jump out of the stands and go help that kid because that kid was your kid, even if it wasn't your kid. And he said it was one of the most, and it's pretty boring being a baseball parent, because most of the time you're sitting there for 3 hours in the hot sun watching your kid play baseball, or worse, watching your kid not play baseball while he sits on the bench until his turn is to play. So what do when you're sitting with all these parents for 3 hours a day, every day, day after day, week after week? You become pretty close. You share your thoughts, your dreams, your yearnings, your worries, your cares, your concerns, your joys, your challenges. You create community. You create a holy society, right? Where everyone gets to make demands on each other and everybody supports each other. What if you could bring that beyond the boundaries of community to, let's say, nationhood? Either for us as a people or the state of Israel. One of the big critiques that you're starting to see in Israeli society and in American society is that we think that we're only responsible in covenant for the people of our party or who voted for a particular coalition. Whereas if you want to have a healthy nation, I have to have a covenantal commitment to everybody, whether they voted for me or not. And that goes both ways. So if the leader doesn't feel a covenantal responsibility to everybody they govern, you're going to have a society that's in trouble. If the people who are being governed don't feel a sense of covenantal obligation to a leader they didn't choose, you're still in trouble, right? Because then those societies fall apart. So when we think about what he's talking about, the Omer is actually a way of thinking about sort of who it is that we want. If we see this passage from Pirkei Avot, this comes from chapter 6 of Pirkei Avot, the rabbis do an amazing thing. They say, and it says the tablets were the work of God and the writing was the writing of God engraven on the tablets. Okay? And the word for engraving is harut. So the rabbis say, don't read it harut, graven, but herut. When you read the Kiddush for freedom, for Pesach, it says Zman Cherutenu, the time of our liberation or freedom. So he says, don't read the tablets were the work of God and the writing was the writing of God graven on the tablets. Read it, the freedom upon the tablets. No one can be free except those who get busy with the study of Torah. If you're not invested in what those tablets say, if you think you just have unbridled freedom to do whatever you want, and you don't realize that it's not freedom from, but freedom for, then you miss the whole point of what freedom is. And what Pesach and Shavuot in these 49 days do is they teach you to say, you are free, mazel tov. Use it for the holier and higher purposes that your life could mean. Does that make sense? So moving forward from that, there are different levels of how a holiday is observed. Partly it's physical, partly it's historical, partly it's spiritual. Rabbi Kadar writes that this dimension involves the spiritual path to self-awareness and personal evolution, as well as celebration and commemoration. History and land bind us to time and place. The spiritual dimension bids us to experience, transcend, and aspire. So this experience of these 50 days is not just thinking about what kind of a society we want. It's not just thinking about what freedom is for. It's actually about our own inner self-awareness and how we're embarking on our own inner personal journeys. So why do we count every day? Because sustained daily contemplation and consideration enable us to focus our attention and heighten our awareness toward the importance and sacred energy of our lives. We count, and in so doing, we make an accounting of who we are and who we want to be. The daily rhythm makes this a practice, and the intentional internal accounting makes it a spiritual practice. One of the things that I learned a long time ago is that the difference between people who are crazy successful and the people who are kind of successful had very little often to do with genius and had mostly to do with discipline.
This is more intense than I when you think about it. I mean, it's for, you're doing this for 50 days. It's not just 10 days then, or start out.
It's more than it, right? It's more than it appears, right? When I work out with my trainer, he usually says, all right, do 15 repetitions of this or 15 repetitions of that. And then today we were doing something, he says, do 50. I said 15, he said, no, 50. And then after I'd already done a lot of exercise and he wanted me to do 50 push-ups. And I said, 50? A very mean person. But what was amazing is that through that sustained pressure, A, I burned a lot of calories, and B, when I was done, I felt I had accomplished more than a typical 15 rep kind of a workout. 50 is a lot, but it's in many ways, whatever you invest, you get more. So Rabbi Kedar writes the following: go to the edge of what we know. Sit there. Let your feet dangle over the edge. Pause and reflect on the enormity of what lies before you. That which you don't know. That which you will never experience. That which you will never comprehend. You don't need to master it all. And you don't need to regret the destinations you won't reach. You can just look over and marvel and wonder with humility and appreciation for the vision, for the gift of what brought you to the edge, of what you will bring back and forward into your life. So take a minute, if you can, and if you have a piece of paper, you can journal this. If you don't have a piece of paper, you can noodle on it and meditate. But what I'd like for you to do is to think for a moment, if you can, about what is the big question of your life in this moment. What is the big question that is animating you, puzzling you, driving you at this moment? And if you can think about what that question is, write it down. Does anybody want to share? Anybody online or here in the room with us?
I'll share, Rabbi.
Go ahead, Judy.
First, I just want to mention, for 10 years, I've been using this book to count the Omer. And my question to you, Rabbi, is don't we always start at the end of the second day? So the holiday is over. We can work.
You actually start in the evening of the second day, not the end of the second day, the evening.
Right, okay.
You count the second save, if you have a second save. Go ahead.
I can't hear you well.
Go ahead.
Well, I listed 3 things. I have a chronic disease, and my first question is, will I ever be well? And then, what is my next step in my life? Which of my children will I move in with? That's a very, very big decision. After 62 years with Mike, I'm on my own for the first time in my life. So it's a dilemma for me.
Those are big questions. Big questions, for sure. Thank you, Judy. Someone else.
Well, that's gonna sound petty after.
Everything's relevant.
Well,
There's no wrong question.
I'm of a certain age. Sometimes, and just been very unhappy with this operation. Took a new job yesterday. It was a big step. And you know, that's a hard thing to do at this time. But I feel good about it, but it's like, you know, I have to, well, so it's that, you know how when you go to something new. So I'm pleased about it, and I think I'm ready, but you know, it's interesting that I'm doing it this time. It's big.
Interesting. Yeah, so you're embarking on a new beginning. Good, someone else. Yeah, go ahead, Judy. Judy.
Just for me, with family in Chicago and I live here, I'm just always looking at how I can be, how long I can be, that I don't have to rely on them at all, live here to my fullest, without, as independent. So I'm only kind of in the back of my, serious about that,
Great.
or just.
Those are big questions too.
I have like a big umbrella question
Mhm.
or double question. How can I live my fullest life and to be all I can be, to not only nurture myself, but those whose lives I touch?
Beautiful. How can I live my fullest life and nurture those that you want to touch? Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. Anyone else want to share?
Right. Mine might be other people's as well, but I believe you know, it depends on each individual situation, but I'm concerned about what will the future bring. And not knowing that things are coming. And, so, where to live, you're getting, all sorts of issues like that. That's what I mean.
So a lot of liminal spaces of what's going to be in terms of how life will unfold.
Not knowing how to control, suddenly are, and you want to feel that you are, you want to feel that you have the choice or freedom to make decisions, but so many of those kind of decisions are really change.
Right. And so what is the word embedded in the word question that makes us think about Passover, Shavuot, the Omer?
That's
Quest. Isn't interesting that embedded in the word question is quest. And the one thing that makes human beings human is that we ask questions. That's it. That's what makes a free person a human being, is that they can ask questions. They can desire more knowledge. They can desire more understanding, right? My dog, God bless him, doesn't ask questions, right? He makes requests like, please open the door and let me out so I don't get in trouble for doing my business in the house. But he's not asking, I wonder whether I should live, you know, here or there, right? He's not asking the kinds of either, should I take a new job kind of a question, right? Or even existential questions. He's just dogging, right? But human beings from the time we're little ask those questions. Should I be friends with so-and-so or not? Should I major in psychology or literature? Should I live in Boca Raton or somewhere else? Should I marry so-and-so or not marry so-and-so? And those are big questions. And they are not just key to who we are as human beings, right? They also enable us to realize that life is in and of itself, as Rabbi Kedar suggested in the poem that we looked at, a journey. The questions oftentimes define our quest. And they sometimes animate some of the most difficult things that we ever encounter. So we were talking about this a little bit at Torah study, right? Sometimes the question is, can I get my mother to love me even if she's dead? Right? Because I didn't feel the love I needed from her when she was alive, and now I'm still carrying all that baggage, right? Can I forgive my father for the things that happened in my childhood that still animate me, even though I haven't been a child for decades? Can I be who right? We all sometimes have whatever our questions are that fuel us. When I did this exercise months ago to start preparing for our Omer practice, I wrote, how can we learn to hear God call us to be partners in healing a broken world and our broken selves? Right? Which I think is, what am I doing here? How do I know I'm doing it? That question pushed me to write an op-ed against this terrible bill that got passed in the state Senate to restrict the right of a woman to terminate a pregnancy if she finds it's in her best interest to do so. I wrote that op-ed because I care about that, because I see our world backsliding in terms of the rights that women ought to be able to enjoy and to have autonomy over their own personhood and their reproductive freedom. And it was making me lose sleep. I still couldn't keep them from passing the bill, but I felt like I had to shout about the issue that was animating me, because this is a question that animates me. So as we think about where we're going from here, we're going to be using these 50 days to embark on a quest. And that quest is going to help us to try as best we can to overcome what enslaves us. We get enslaved by our assumptions of what's possible. We are enslaved by words that we use and the constructs of our thoughts and speech, the way we explain the past and speak about the future. We are enslaved by our presumed limitations. We are enslaved by negativity and cynicism. We're enslaved by our fear. There's lots and lots of things that enslave us, right? And the idea is, I wonder if there's a pathway to liberate ourselves somewhat of that, to be more the people we desire to be, given the limitations that are a part of us. And so the way we're going to do that is by looking through these 7 principles. The first is to decide. With fortitude, determination, and focus, we can decide that the way we are living, thinking, behaving no longer serves us. What was the very first act of creation? It wasn't let there be light. What was the very first act of creation? When God decided, I think I should create a world. Right? The idea. It wasn't day and night. The first thing that God had to do before there was day and night is to decide, I'm going to make a world. It's not a small thing to decide. We find ourselves affirming our decisions and refining them over and over. And sometimes, as quickly as we decide, we often get confused. We question our decisions. There's always these voices in our head, right? What do my friends tell me? What do my kids tell me? What do my parents tell me? What does my rabbi tell me? What does the television tell me? What does TikTok and Facebook tell me? How do I know, right? What do I listen to? Do I listen to my son or Dr. Oz? Do I listen to my financial advisor or my daughter? Or my partner? And to what end? Then we will enter into discernment. Discernment is trying to find clarity. It's fine-tuning. It's trusting intuition. It's figuring out, all right, of these three choices, which one am I going to follow? Then I have to choose. If I discern, okay, I can do three things. I can live with this kid, or that kid. I can work at this company, that company, or that company. And I go through the process of discernment that say that's the best option. Then I actually have to choose to do it. And then in the midst of that choice and embarking, I have to hope that I'm moving forward in the right direction. Hope becomes the answer to fear so much as possible. Imagine the possibilities when we envision ourselves as strong, healthy, loving. Miracles abound, right? Think about how important hope has been in the wanderings of our people through history. There's a reason why it's our national anthem.
But I think it's true, have action,
You have to have imagination, right?
you know, hoping's nice if you don't do anything about it.
Right? That's why you had choice that was before, right? And these things, move along. It's not necessarily linear, right? And then you have to imagine, right? That the way things are might not necessarily be the way they have to be. Where would your imagination lead you if you would open your mind to consider a different reality? Or being in a different place, or greeting the day in a different frame of mind. And then you need courage. You need courage to live, courage to love, courage to risk, courage to fail, and patience. It takes time to become the person we want to be, to grow and unfold and to fail and then to persevere, right? The Israelites didn't make it to the promised land in 3 months. It took them 40 years. The Israelites didn't make it instantaneously to Sinai. They had to wander for 50 days. It took a while. And you need courage to keep putting one foot in front of the other. And then lastly, we need to pray. Prayer sometimes is keeping your eye on the ball and focusing your mind on what not to be distracted. But prayer can also say, hey, I need a little help here. I need more energy than I think I have. I need more insight than I think I can muster. I think I need more understanding than that which I know. And to call out for a sense of needing the Holy One to help us on these processes. And so over the next several weeks, we'll have the opportunity to explore these in much deeper fashion. And I look forward to joining you on that journey, along with the rest of my colleagues.
Thank you.
So wish everybody Chag Sameach, Hatzis and Pesach. I hope you enjoy your holidays wherever you're celebrating them. And we will look forward to seeing you with matzah in hand, okay, next week. Take care, everybody.